Part 88. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 871. Ordinary men study hard for 10 years and are mostly adults when they enter the imperial examination. Even if they have real skills, they are usually in their 20s or even 30 years old before they can enter the examination room. After all, there are very few young prodigies. Entering the officialdom in their 20s or 30s, starting from the bottom, waiting for time, qualifications, and political achievements, they get a small promotion every 3 years, and maybe they can get a significant promotion in 7 or 8 years. As they once said, most people can barely get a 4th or 5th rank when they are in their 50s or 60s, and some people even stay as a small county magistrate for their whole life. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin are young and promising. Their current status and positions are the highest points that many people can never reach in their lifetime. Moreover, they are still young and will continue to work as generals and powerful ministers, protecting the country for the prince, stabilizing the court for the prince, and being the most solid shield and sword after the prince ascends the throne. Abdicate and retire? This will happen at least 20 years later. Moreover, robbing the rich to help the poor mostly happens in troubled times or dynasties with rampant corrupt officials. Today, Dongling is prosperous. Even if there are still poor people, it is not necessary to rob the rich to help the poor, Xiejin said leisurely. Besides, robbing the rich to help the poor is not a real hero after all, and it is not as good as the merits of the generals who defend the country and the land. Xian Yuanyao said, I just said it casually. You don't have to take it seriously. Xiejin raised his eyebrows. What Yao Yao said, I have always kept it in mind. How can I not take it seriously? Xian Yuanyao heard the words, his eyebrows shao yang. In this case, everything will be up to me from now on. Yao Yao. Xiejin sat up and sighed, you can't bully me. Xian Yuanyao wanted to ask who bullied him, but his eyes turned to Xiejin's face, and suddenly reached out to grab his chin, like a bully teasing a decent woman. You are my wife, who should I bully if I don't bully you? Beating is love and scolding is love, haven't you heard of it? Xiejin's lips curled up, his eyes full of bewitching meaning. Beating is love, scolding is love. Xian Yuanyao nodded. Then, you want to hit me? What are you thinking about? Xiejin laughed and reached out to take his hand. What I want to say is that the 10-year agreement has come, and we haven't changed our minds. Shouldn't we celebrate? Xian Yuanyao narrowed his eyes at him. How to celebrate? What do you think? Let me eat you up from head to toe and from inside to outside. Okay, Xiejin agreed very straightforwardly, but there are conditions. What conditions? Although we have an imperial decree to marry, we have never held a real wedding ceremony. Xiejin stretched out his hand to hold his waist, flew down from the roof, and quickly stood on the ground with his feet. I have prepared a wedding night tonight, let's enjoy it. Bridal night? Xian Yuanyao was stunned. Are you bored? What are you talking about? Life should always create some surprises from time to time. How boring it is to be unchanging. Xiejin took him by the arm and walked towards the inner courtyard. Since His Majesty gave you this general's mansion, it is well known that I, the legitimate son of the Xie family, have officially become your wife. Logically, these surprises should be prepared by you, your husband. Hearing the word wife, Xian Yuanyao paused and turned to look at him expressionlessly. Then in the future, when I introduce your identity in front of outsiders, should I say humble wife? Xiejin said seriously, I think wife is more appropriate, which proves that Yao Yao cares about me. Those who love their wives would rather call her wife than cheap wife. Xian Yuanyao looked at him speechlessly for a long time. Xiejin. Why do I like you? Xiejin laughed happily, what's wrong with me? You are particularly pleasing. Xian Yuanyao put his arm around his waist and rushed to the inner courtyard. I will do you now. The red candles were shining brightly in the house, and the curtains and lanterns were all red, full of joy. Xian Yuanyao threw Xiejin onto the bed. Since you have arranged everything, it would be wrong for me not to help you. Don't sleep tonight, let's see who has better physical strength. Xiejin lay on the bed and accepted the challenge with a smile. Please teach me window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 872. Zanruo arrived in Dongling in May, and with him came Yin's Huang, Yin's Huang holding the child. As soon as they met, Zhanruo asked for the reward first. Yin Shuang and I just had a child. Your Majesty made a decree, so we came all the way here. It was a hard journey with a lot of travel. Does Your Majesty have any comments? When he got married last year, he submitted a memorial. Nan 11 already knew about him and Yin Shuang. She was happy because Zhanruo got married, and she was also relieved that Yin Shuang finally got married. If it were anyone else this time, he would definitely not dare to ask Her Majesty the Queen for a reward so confidently. However, Zhanruo has always been bold and has no rules. With his fearless courage, even the regent dared to ask for a reward. Of course it's a no-brainer. Reward, Nan 11 smiled lightly, you and Yin's Huang are exempted. How dare you ask for a reward for such a big man? After that, he turned to look at Yunyu. Go and see if there is still the longevity lock that I gave to your vassal in the inner treasury. If there is, give him one. Yunyu smiled and responded, yes. Nan 11 turned to look at Zhanruo. You guys are really good at ink. The children of the Yunyu family are already over 10 years old, and you are less than 1 year old. Everything you do is slower than others. Zhanruo muttered, the main reason is that Yin Shuang is too difficult to deal with. I don't know how she can become so good at martial arts. I couldn't beat her, so she never agreed to marry her. She had to let me practice martial arts every day. I finally got a tie. The marriage has been arranged. I have never seen a family that had to fight before getting married. As a result, he, a fairy-like prince, only knew how to wield swords and guns every day. In just a few months, his body became extremely strong and powerful. It was fine even if he put on clothes. When I wear clothes, I will look too strong and not at all as airy as before. Nan 11 looked at Yin's Huang. He didn't bully you, right? No. Yin Shuang shook his head. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. Zhanruo is very good, but sometimes he is a little willful. I will take good care of him in the future. Please rest assured, Your Majesty. Zhanruo's mouth twitched. Yin's Huang, can you save some face for me in front of His Majesty? Yin's Huang turned to look at him with a strange expression. Do you have face? Zhanruo. My vision is indeed right. Nan 11 smiled lightly. You two are a perfect match. One thing brings another down, and Zhanruo, a willful guy, has to rely on Silver Frost to cure him. A few people chatted and laughed for a while, and then Zhanruo got back to the topic. Your Majesty called me here for His Majesty's affairs, right? Nan 11 looked serious and nodded slowly, yes. The words of the High Priest are trustworthy. Zhanruo said, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince will have a calamity when he is 16. Only after passing this calamity can he ascend the throne and become the emperor. Otherwise, he is afraid that the country will be unstable and the government will be turbulent. Yin Yu brought the longevity lock to Yin Shuang. Since Yin Shuang went to the Yu Kingdom, the two have not seen each other for a long time. This time Yin Shuang came back with her child. Yin Yu was happy in her heart and said, let's go, let's put the child on the bed to rest first. Even adults are exhausted after traveling such a long distance, let alone a child. Nan 11 and Zhanruo talked about business, and Yin Yu told the people in the palace to take good care of her. then she went to the side hall with Yinchuang with her child in her arms. "How is it?" Yin Yu poured a cup of tea for Yinchuang. "Do you feel that getting married is actually pretty good?" Yin's Huang was silent for a moment. "These are actually not in my plan." Jean Ruo said that she was difficult to handle. In fact, it was not because Yinchuang liked to put on airs. In fact, getting married was not in her life plan at all. Having a child of her own was something she had never thought about, so after so many years, when she stayed in Yu country, she only regarded herself as a bodyguard, but she was following the queen's imperial edict. Even though her duty was to protect Jeanruo, she had no intention of treating him as her master. It's just that for some reason, Jeanruo and Jeanruo became a couple after making trouble. Yin Yu and Yinchuang talked about what happened in the past few years in the side hall, while Jeanruo comforted Nan 11 in the outer hall. "Sister, don't worry too much, don't forget that the prince is the reincarnation of the Emperor's star. No matter what calamity, it's nothing to him, the prince can get through it easily. When it comes to her son's safety, Nan 11 does not dare to take it lightly. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Jeanruo said. "If the prince is really in any danger, the worst I can do is give him my life. If I exchange one life for another, I can always keep the prince safe." Nan 11 frowned. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Jean Ruodeo, "The prince is the crown prince of Dongling. He will be the master of the country in the future. Nothing unexpected will happen to him. My life is not worth much. It is too easy for me to exchange my life for my life dash." "Shut up," Nan 11 interrupted him. "Don't think about these impossible things. I'm just a little worried and didn't let you trade your life for your life." Jean Ruo smiled and said, "Sister, don't worry, I'm just telling you the worst possible outcome. In the worst case, you can't exchange your life for his," Nan 11 said, her eyebrows slightly deepened. "I want to go to the priest's hall." "What are you doing there?" Jean Ruo frowned, obviously disapproving. "The priest's hall is full of pure men. They should pray for blessings, burn incense. They are all doing their duties. Sister, as a queen, you should do the queen's business well and don't worry about the rest." After a pause, "I will take a bath and burn incense in the past 2 days. I will go to the priest's hall to do a good calculation for the prince. Sister, please be patient. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 873. When Rong Yu came back from Qinzhen Palace in the evening, Jeanruo and Yinchuang took their children to rest. The palace people came forward to wait for the regent to wash his face. Yin Yu made tea and presented it, then left. Rong Yu sat down next to Nan 11. When he saw her, her eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and he stretched out his hand to stroke her brow. "You are pregnant, so make sure you are in a happy mood." "I can't feel happy," Nan 11 stated Jeanruo's words and said with a frown. "Both the high priest and Jeanruo have calculated Haoer's fate, so there should be no difference, but Haoer is an emperor star. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any danger. The more a person is destined by fate, the more he will endure hardships and tests. This is probably because destiny is unpredictable, which is normal." Rong Yu's voice was calm and gentle, revealing a reassuring magic power. "If this hadn't happened to Haoer, we may be more open-minded, but Haoer is our son, and worrying about our children is an experience that every parent will have." Nan 11 raised her eyes fell quietly on his face, and suddenly smiled. "Such a big thing seems to have become normal when it comes to you. There is no need to worry too much." Rong Yu reached out and hugged her into his arms. His voice was calm. "The high priest cares about Dongling Shiji more than us. He will not just watch something happen to Haoer." Zanruo went to the priest's hall early the next morning. Yinchuang stayed in the palace to take care of the child. After the child fell asleep, she and Yin Yu stayed with Nan 11 to wait on her. Nan 11 happened to be idle and had nothing to do, so she chatted with her about Jeanruo. How did Jeanruo catch you? Yin's Huang frowned slightly, as if thinking about it, and said after a moment, I didn't chase him. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. I don't know why he wants to marry me, Yin Shuang said. In the first 2 years when I arrived in Yu country, most of the time I had nothing to say to him. He ignored me and I ignored him. Nan 11 laughed, your temperament is quite normal. Jeanruo aspires to be a fortune teller who tells people's fortunes. He definitely doesn't care about the love of his children, so it's normal that there won't be any sparks between him and Yin Shuang. Yin Shuang has a cold temperament. She is taciturn and can stay silent for a whole day. If Zanruo ignores her, she is afraid that she will treat Zanruo as nothing. But the two have been together for 10 years. Even if it's just a stone, you might suddenly enlighten yourself one day, and you might suddenly see something that attracts you in the other person, or you might get emotional because of the frequent quarrels. After all, Jeanruana has such a stubborn and willful temper. I'm afraid only Yin's Huang can control him in this world. Since I'm back this time, I'll stay in the palace for a while longer, Nan 11 said. There are officials in the Yuchen fiefdom responsible for managing the area. If Zanruo leaves for a few days, there won't be any problems. Yin's Huang nodded, yes. Nan 11 sighed softly, everyone around me finally has a destination, and I am happy to see it. Not only do we all have a destination, but our children have grown up. Yunyu sighed, time flies so fast. Nan 11 smiled but said nothing. Time flies indeed, and the children grow up in the blink of an eye. Qingyang and Yunyu's children were given the surname Rong back then. Rong Yu thought that because they were close friends, Rong Yu originally thought that Rong Chen had grown up with the prince since childhood and had attended classes and learned martial arts together. Maybe they would grow up together. He also wanted to be a military commander, but he didn't expect that Rong Chen didn't like reading and didn't want to study the art of war. He just wanted to be the best master in the palace and take protecting the prince as his own responsibility. Qingyang and Yunyu were both secret guards. Since their son had such a great ambition, they both naturally fulfilled it, so they taught him martial arts carefully. In addition to what they learned in the palace, they trained and guided him according to the standards of secret guards when they returned home. Rong Chen, who is now just 12 years old, has skills that few others can match. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 874. The two children, Xianyu Enhui and Rongzhan, were tinkering with the 36 strategies of war every day, and they often dueled on paper. Whenever they couldn't come up with a better result, they would ask the prince to judge. When they were young, the prince would even make a few comments, and when they grew up, they would judge. Winning or losing is no longer that important, life and death is the key. So Xianyu Enhao asked people to invite Xianyu Enyao, and the group went directly to the juvenile barracks to use their military strategies in actual combat exercises. The enemy and we each picked 3,000 people. This was not only a training for Xianyu Enhui and Rongzhan, but also you can test the training results of the youth army. The two of them were still young and would not participate directly. Instead, they carefully wrote down their respective military strategies, and Xianyu Enyao copied them word for practice. In the end, the success or failure of the young army was the success or failure of the two of them. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince made clear rewards and punishments, and was calm and self-possessed. The winners were all rewarded, and the losers were all punished. It was easy for the young people to devote themselves to the exercises instead of treating the exercises as a house game. After several exercises, Xianyu Enhui and Rongzhan was a half-win situation, but compared to winning or losing, they felt many more profound things from it. They no longer insisted on competing for victory or defeat, and began to immerse themselves in studying the art of war. For a while, they almost going crazy. 10 years have passed. The reason why the youth army is still called the youth army is because of the step training method that the youth army has been using over the years. It takes 5 years to train the youth army's physical strength, reaction ability, riding and shooting, and individual combat capabilities. Those who are qualified can directly after being promoted to the Obsidian Army. The number of young people in the youth army will be replenished every year according to age. The young man has a strong sense of honor. After the Obsidian Army returned from the expedition to South Vietnam, it was already recognized as the Army of Kings. Apart from some of the people who joined the army to support their families, most of them were proud to join the Obsidian Army, so the training was especially able to focus on hard work and endure hardships. His Royal Highness the Prince had to be busy with government affairs after attending classes every day, and did not have much time to serve as a referee for the two children. He directly taught them a few lessons with practical actions, and then his ears became quieter. In the past 10 years, Donglink's army has grown year by year, reaching the most powerful force in the world, and no one can surpass it. Xianyuan Zhan and Sen En are the right-hand men of the Crown Prince. As the first son of the Grand Tutor to study with the Crown Prince, no matter how many accompanying students come later, Xianyuan Zhan's status is unshakable. When the Crown Prince enters the Kinzen Hall and starts to handle government affairs, he is always around him. Xianyuan Zhan's shadow. The two are monarchs and ministers, and also the closest friends and confidants. Rong Chen took it as his own duty to protect the prince and was loyal, so he naturally stayed with the prince at all times. So whenever people in the palace saw the prince, they would almost always have Xianyuan Zhan and Rong Chen accompanying him. The catastrophe of 16 years old did not have much impact on Xianyuan Hao. Should he go to court or go to court? Should he deal with government affairs or deal with government affairs? Maybe the young man does not have a deep understanding of the issue of life and death, or in fact, the older he gets, the more likely he is to deal with government affairs. Young people don't have much fear of life and death. Because the Queen Mother was pregnant, Xianyuan Hao took the initiative to take on more government affairs. In the Kinzen Hall, Xianyuan Hao sorted out the memorial a little, and asked Xianyuan Zhan and Sen En to come over and help him, sift out the nonsense that is all in the memorial and put it aside. Bring the important things to me first. Xianyuan Zhan hummed and began to focus on sifting through the memorials. The young man's eyebrows are handsome and elegant, as gentle as jade. There is no trace of the impetuousness and frivolity of a young man in his eyebrows. Instead, he is as calm as a spring of water, silent and without any ripples. Your Highness, there is something strange happening in Huainan. Sen En came over with a folder and handed it to Xianyuan Hao. Xianyuan Hao took the folder and read it carefully without saying a word. After reading it, he said calmly, King Genies has been away from Huainan for 10 years. The major families in the Huainan fiefdom are like beasts out of trouble, and they have lost control. The general trend of the world is like this. Something will happen from time to time. Xianyuan Zhan's voice was as quiet as lake water. Huainan is far away from the imperial capital and the imperial city. The sky is high and the emperor is far away. In the past, the king of Huainan controlled it, and all the major families could stay safe. In the years after King Huainan left, the major families did not dare to act too rashly because of his remaining power. Now, as time has passed, interests have finally overcome fear. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 875. It is said that if the general trend of the world unites for a long time, it must divide, and if it divides for a long time, it must unite. In fact, the same is true for countries and families. In an era where corrupt officials are rampant, the king is strong and the country is governed with lightning skills, which will definitely frighten the people of the world with ruthlessness and make people feel at ease. The country is prosperous, the people live and work in peace and contentment, and the king has fewer opportunities to use his thunderous tactics. As time goes by, the officials in the court can still self-reflect on themselves because they see the king every day, and the officials and bullies from various places who are far away from the imperial capital no longer have any fear. The mind will naturally have restless thoughts. Ambitious people can never be satisfied with the status quo. The symptoms have only appeared temporarily. Even if he needs to be treated, there is no big crime. Xian Yuanhao put down the memorial and said, Azan, Sen En, follow me to see Uncle Yao. Xian Yuanzhan nodded, yes. Xian Yuanyao was in the military camp at this time. Rongzhan and Xian Yuanhui had also been training in the military camp during this time. When the prince left the palace, Rong Chen would definitely accompany him. When the four of them rode out of the city, they headed straight for the military camp in the western suburbs. The prince has left the palace. Qingyang nodded, take Xian Yuanzhan, Sen En and Rong Chen. Rong Yu asked, where have you gone? He said he was going to see the general hussar. Rong Yu was silent for a moment, then raised his eyes to look at Nan 11, it seems that the prince is already able to handle government affairs on his own. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows, have you guessed his purpose of meeting Xian Yuanyao? Rong Yu nodded slowly. Even if you can stand alone, it's not appropriate to leave the palace so often. Nan 11 frowned, every time you leave the palace, you can't help but make people worry. The child is older and has his own ideas and the ability to protect himself. Rong Yu said calmly, besides, Rong Chen and Xian Yuanzhan are by his side, so you don't have to worry too much. Nan 11's eyebrows were filled with worries, ever since the high priest's words, I have always wanted Hao not to leave the palace again, at least until he has passed the age of 16 safely. Compared with Hao's life and death, abdication has become less important. As long as Hao can survive the catastrophe of 16 years old safely, there is nothing wrong with letting her be the emperor for another 20 years. Hao went to see Xian Yuanyao probably because of matters related to Huan, and Rong Yu sat aside with a cup of tea. There are no tigers in the mountains, and monkeys are kings. After 10 years of King Zhenyi's absence, those local officials and local squires are afraid gotta work up an appetite. Huainan was originally governed by layers of officials, but because the original king of Huainan guarded the border to intimidate those people's ambitions, the family did not dare to blatantly expand, and the officials of the various states in that fiefdom also knew how to restrain themselves. After the king of Huainan left, no one suppressed Huainan. It would be fine if the officials could continue to be fair and virtuous. If they couldn't, I'm afraid they would be like a beast out of trouble and out of control. The territory is vast and the border fortresses far away from the imperial city should be divided and ruled by the vassal kings. Nan 11 pondered, otherwise, officials will easily lose themselves. Rong Yu nodded slowly, Hao has his own ideas on how to govern the country in the future. Our method may not be suitable for him. Fortunately, there won't be any big problems for the time being. When he ascends the throne, he may be able to come up with a more thorough approach. Come. Nan 11 said nothing, but knew that Rong Yu was right. However, even if he ascends the throne, you can't just let it go. Hao is still young after all, so there will inevitably be some ill-considered things. This is natural. Rong Yu's voice was particularly calm, he is our son, why would I ignore him? Nan 11 looked at him suspiciously, really? 11 doesn't believe me. It's not that I don't believe you, Nan 11 sighed, it's that you always act like you want to give up, which makes it hard for people to trust you wholeheartedly. Nan 11 has not forgotten that when Hao was still in her belly, Rong Yu planned everything after Hao ascended the throne, as well as their plan to retreat to the mountains and forests, as if they gave birth to Hao just to rule the country for them. In the past, when Hao was still young, it was all in vain for him to think about it. Now that Hao has really grown up, she naturally has to remind him to not let him just shake hands off. Compared to the fact that they are able to do what they are now, it is because they have 2 lifetimes of memory. No matter how smart and capable Hao is, he will not be able to achieve the skill of his father in a short period of time. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 876. In the big tent of the military camp. There are officials in Huainan who colluded with the gentry to raise taxes without authorization, forcing the people to give up their land. Then they used the least money to buy the land from the people, occupying most of the land in Huainan. Prince Hao handed the memorial to Xian Yuan Yao, with a faint voice, said, "I plan to start renovating Huainan. Does Uncle Yao know anyone there? Someone you know?" Xian Yuan Yao's expression was subtle. His Royal Highness wants to punish the rebellious ministers. Do you need to inform others in advance? Uncle Yao is not a traitor. Xian Yuan Hao's voice was cold and calm. It's just that he may know more about the local officials and squires. If it weren't for Xian Yuan Hao's face that resembled the regent, Xian Yuan Yao would have laughed at this moment. But facing this face that he had seen since childhood, Xian Yuan Yao was not in the mood to joke even though he was only 14 years old. To say that he knows more, His Highness the Crown Prince has really found the wrong person. Xian Yuan Yao stood in front of the desk and said seriously and solemnly, "My father knew much more than I did when he was guarding Huainan, but he left Huainan. It has been 10 years, and I have long lost contact with Huainan. I have nothing to do with the officials and squires in Huainan. Your Highness, there is nothing to worry about." After a pause, even if there is really any involvement, people who have violated national laws and regulations should be dealt with. How to deal with them, regardless of anyone's face. Xian Yuan Hao nodded. "Well, thank you Uncle Yao." "Thank me for what?" Xian Yuan Yao's eyes fell on his face. Even though he was muttering in his heart, he remained calm and calm. The way to be a king is to insist on doing the right thing. In the face of the laws of the family and the country, there's no favors to be said. His attitude was clear. Don't say that he has no connection with Huainan. Even if he does, if he has done something that is intolerable by the king's law, he must accept the punishment he deserves. He cannot be spared for the sake of anyone's face. This can easily encourage unhealthy tendencies. Once started, if there is a breach, there will be endless troubles. Thinking of this, Xian Yuan Yao educated the prince and the people around him. "By the way, you three are the same. Although you are close to the prince, the trust between the monarch and his ministers is very valuable and cannot be broken easily. Once the trust is broken, there is no way to make up for it. Opportunity." Xian Yuan Zhan smiled humbly. "Uncle Yao, don't worry, my father often reminds me, and I don't dare or forget it." Rong Chen's tone was sonorous and powerful. "I swear to be loyal to His Highness to the death. Whoever dares to betray His Highness will be the first one I cannot spare." Zhen An's voice was firm. "I will never betray His Highness even to the death." Xian Yuan Yao was silent. His eyes fell on Xian Yuan Hao's face, and he couldn't help but think of the fear of being dominated by Rong Yu. When he came to Rong Yu was 2 years older than the prince at this time, but the cold and evil aura flowing through his body was something that the prince at this time did not have. But it just lacks a little bit of the cold spirit. In other aspects, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has indeed completely inherited his father's appearance, temperament, demeanor, and majesty. If he is silent, standing here like this, I dare not say that he is exactly the same as Rong Yu back then, but he is at least 70–80% similar. Every time Xian Yuan Yao saw him, he couldn't help but think of Rong Yu back then. His Royal Highness has now begun to supervise the regency of the country. The interests of some officials must be affected when handling government affairs. The world is so big, many things happen every day, whether it is near or far, there are many eyes secretly watching His Highness Xian Yuanyao's voice was light, so if you can't leave the palace, try not to leave the palace. If you have to leave the palace, please bring more experts with you. Your Highness is the crown prince of a country. His own safety is related to the country and the country. You must not arbitrarily put yourself in danger. Xian Yuanhao's voice was cold, but his attitude was courteous and respectful. Thank you, Uncle Yao, for the tip. How'er will keep it in mind. Xian Yuanyao coughed lightly and said, don't be so polite. If you have something to do, go get busy and don't stay outside the palace for too long. The prince hummed, and the group quickly left the military camp. He came to the military camp specially. In fact, he did not necessarily want to discuss anything with Xian Yuanyao, nor did he need him to make any suggestions. He just simply fulfilled his obligation to inform. After all, it was the former territory of King Huainan. At the very least, respect is required. There is nothing else but what needs to be done. Corrupt officials and bullies must be punished, as well as ruffians and squires. But there's no rush yet. Riding back to the inner city, Xian Yuanhao and the others gradually slowed down. The streets were busy with traffic, and it was as if they could hear the sound of children reading loudly in the distance. Xian Yuanhao turned around and said, is Uncle Jin's son already studying? Yes, Xian Yuanzhan nodded, his name is Xia Yao, and he has been studying at Xinglan Academy for 2 years. Xian Yuanhao looked up at the sky and said calmly, let's go to the academy and have a look. Xian Yuanzhan said, Your Highness, please change to the carriage. Several teenagers rode horses to the academy together, which looked too eye-catching. Xian Yuanhao turned over and dismounted, and said in a calm tone, no, this is not far from Xinglan Academy, we can walk there. There happened to be a few big trees where they stopped. The 4 of them led the horses under the trees and tied the reins, then turned and walked in the direction of Xinglan Academy. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 877. Xinglan Academy is an aristocratic academy in the imperial capital. The children who study here are all children of aristocratic families. They spent 10 years here from the beginning at the age of 3 to the completion of their studies in their teens. After graduation, they entered the Imperial College to settle down for a few years. The number of years depends on how quickly you absorb knowledge. In the Imperial College, there have been champions at the age of 15, and there have also been those who failed the scientific examination at the age of 30. The children of the aristocracy have a superior background and have an innate advantage, but not all of them are good at studying. There are many dandies raised by rich families. Just like these ones in front of me. Beado, I heard that your father is a cut-sleeve man and likes men. A young man wearing a brocade robe blocked Xia Yao under a big tree, with a sneer and contempt on his face. You were born in such a family, will you be able to also like men? It's so disgusting. A man likes another man. It's really a shameless world. My father said that people who read the books of sages must not learn these deviant things. They are simply shameless and disgrace the scholars. Your name was also given by your father? Wasn't he the #1 scholar back then? Why did he give you such a vulgar name, laxative, Croton, ha ha. Croton. Ha ha ha, isn't Croton a laxative? Even if it isn't, it still has the same effect, ha 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 ha. Xia Yao stood under the tree, staring silently at the group of teenagers who were several years older than him. His young and handsome face was covered with frost, and his pair of red and phoenix eyes unique to the Xia family were slightly upturned, beautiful but beautiful. Full of evil spirit. Are you done? He said calmly. The little child's tone was particularly calm, without revealing any shame or anger. You're done, can you listen to me? The young men surrounding him looked at him with either unkind eyes, gloating about his misfortune, or sarcastically, "What do you want to say?" "I don't want to say too much." Xiao narrowed his eyes, "just 3 sentences. The teenagers looked at each other, feeling that his reaction was too calm. Xiao raised a finger. "First, my biological parents got married through a matchmaker, and it was natural for them to give birth to me." Several teenagers sneered. Xiao raised his second finger. "Second, my daddy Jin and daddy Yao dare to break the world and love each other sincerely. I don't think this is a shameful thing, let alone disgusting." The teenagers despised it. Xiao raised his eyes and raised his third finger. "Third, your father's mouth is too short and he is not suitable to be a court official. I will go back tonight and tell Daddy Jin exactly what you said. You are waiting for your father be dismissed." The expressions of the young men suddenly changed, with panic appearing on their faces. After saying the last sentence, the corners of Xiao's lips seemed to curl up, with a bit of a cruel arc, but disappeared in an instant and returned to his usual smiling, optimistic and harmless look. "Daddy Yao doesn't like me. I'm fighting with someone outside, so I'll let you go today. I'll teach you some tricks in the archery class tomorrow afternoon." After he finished speaking, he raised his hand to signal a few people to give way. The teenagers present obviously didn't dare to really attack him, so they obediently moved out of the way. Xiao, the leading boy, suddenly spoke, turned around and stared at Xiao's back, and said angrily, "Complaining is not what a hero does." There was a bit of uneasiness in his tone of voice, as if he was sullen and angry. A hero, people's behavior. Several young people's faces were pale and speechless. "Go and tell Xiejin? Who has the guts?" Xiao started to leave, but several people behind him quickly stepped forward to surround him and stopped him from leaving. "Xiao." "What?" Xiao raised his eyebrows. "You want to fight?" The leading boy raised his chin and said calmly and fiercely, "As long as you promise not to complain when you go back, I will pretend that what happened today never happened." Xiao was surprised. "Didn't it happen?" "Right." Xiao sighed, "But it has clearly happened. How can we pretend it didn't happen? What I mean is, as long as you behave, we won't beat you, and we won't scold you in the future." Xiao looked at him as if he were an idiot. Several teenagers were taller than him. Xiao stood in the circle surrounded by several people, feeling like a pitiful little boy. However, his expression was the most relaxed, and his eyebrows were even slightly sarcastic. "I'm not afraid of you scolding me, because none of you can escape if you scold me. I'm afraid it's only minor if your mouth is swollen 99% of the time. I'm not afraid of you hitting me, as long as you can beat me." A 7-year-old child said such words. Even if his tone did not sound arrogant, he had already taken his arrogance to the extreme. Xian Yuanhao stood in the corridor of the academy, using the cover of vegetation to quietly watch the scene of the 7-year-old boy being calm and fearless in front of several teenagers and counter-attacking beautifully. Xiao's temperament is similar to that of Uncle Jin's 7 images. If Uncle Yao hadn't been here, there would have been Jukan. Xian Yuanzhan said, "Uncle Yao is upright and won't let him cause trouble outside. If he is bullied, he can complain to the adults." Xian Yuanhafei asked, "Is there any minister in the court who dares to criticize Uncle Jin in private?" "There must be some boring and chattering people." Xian Yuanzhan said, "There are so many officials in the court, there are always a few bad apples that are not worthy of being on the stage." Xian Yuanhao said, "Does he practice martial arts at home? Uncle Jin should teach him martial arts. Although Xiao is still young, he must have learned the most basic self-defense skills." "I don't know about the rest." Xian Yuanzhan said, "If your highness wants to know, why not call him over and try?" Xian Yuanhao was silent for a moment. "No, let him grow freely first, and wait for the right time to bring him into the palace for training." "Training?" Xian Yuanzhan was silent, a little surprised that the word came out of the prince's mouth, but he didn't say anything, just nodded and said Then the four of them left the academy, just as quietly as when they came. Except for a few old teachers, they did not alarm the students in the academy. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 878. Although going to the academy was just a whim decision, after returning to the palace, Xian Yuanhao also paid attention to the situation of the Xie family. Sure enough, in the evening, the heads of the major aristocratic families in the imperial capital hurried to the general's mansion to make amends with their useless things. In addition to everyone carrying heavy gifts in their hands, several young people all had bruises and swollen faces. Apparently after returning home, got a good beating. How did Uncle Jin respond? Master Xie didn't know what happened at all. He saw so many people coming to apologize, so he went to ask Xie Yao. Rong Chen stood beside him and replied expressionlessly, then Xie Yao told me what happened in the academy. I told Mr. Xie everything. So, Xie Yao didn't complain after he returned. Rong Chen shook his head, probably not. Although Xie Yao is young, he is more than capable of dealing with those dandy boys. Complaining should be just to scare them. Xian Yuanzhan sat opposite the prince, holding a white stone in his hand. In the academy, you can't take the initiative to fight, and you don't want to be beaten all day long. If people point their noses and curse, then we can only bring out enough people to shock those few people. In the evening breeze, Xian Yuanhao and Xian Yuanzhan were sitting in a garden pavilion, playing a game of chess. Several palace lanterns were hanging in the pavilion, reflecting the young man's jade-like face and noble features. The black and white chess pieces were crisscrossed on the chessboard. Even Rong Chen, who didn't know much about chess skills, could faintly feel the aura of battle and killing coming towards his face that could not be ignored. Your Highness. Rong Chen saw a figure in his sight and reported respectfully, the Second Highness is here. Xian Yuanhao raised his eyes and saw a fiery figure in a red robe rushing towards him. He was in front of him in a blink of an eye. He knelt down on one knee and said, Brother Emperor. Xian Yuanhao glanced at him, he's so arrogant and has no calmness at all. Brother Royal lectured me again. Xian Yuan Rongzhan walked over directly, knelt down, and watched the two of them fight. Why didn't Brother Royal tell me when he went to the military camp in the afternoon? Why are I telling you? His Highness the Prince's tone was as cold as ever, and only those who were closely accompanying him could hear the warmth in his tone. Please inform me so that I can welcome the Emperor. Brother Rongzhan curled his lips. The Emperor brother didn't even watch the showdown between me and Xian Yuanhui. Nothing big, no little. Xian Yuanhui walked over slowly, with a young and mature tone. Even if you and I are opponents on the battlefield, you have to call me uncle according to seniority. Who allows you to directly call me by my name? Xian Yuanzhan turned to look at him and said with a calm smile, didn't my cousin make a bet with Rongzhan? You have to beat him in military strategy before he is willing to call you uncle. Xian Yuanhui sat down on the side and said calmly, he has a hot temper, is good at attacking in the art of war, and likes to fight and kill fiercely. I am good at defense, so there is no way to make a completely fair comparison with him. Whether you are attacking or defending, you must cooperate just right and leave yourself some room. The prince said in a calm voice, Rongzhan, how many times have I told you? You cannot ignore the front and rear on the battlefield. While defeating the opponent, you must also ensure that the safety of the soldiers and horses under his command cannot be put in danger. It is the most basic requirement to leave an escape route for himself and his soldiers. As long as the soldiers under my command have strong combat effectiveness and the attack is fierce enough to render the enemy defenseless, the retreat is irrelevant. Rongzhan argued, I can beat them until they are completely annihilated. Strong enough and fierce enough, the prince looked at him with an indifferent voice, then tell me, what is the standard for strength? How do you know that the soldiers and horses under your command are the strongest? The armies of other countries cannot be stronger than you. Rongzhan was speechless for a moment. There is heaven outside the world, and there are people outside the world. The prince said, if you have a proud and conceited mentality, it will be a matter of time before you fall. Rongzhan pursed his lips slightly, not daring to argue. The prince closed his eyes and put away the chess pieces. He defeated Xianyuan in this game. He put the chess pieces back one by one, and his voice became fainter. A Zhan gives way, Rongzhan comes over. Rongzhan raised his eyes and looked at him, brother Imperial. Since you are so conceited, I will spar with you. The prince's voice was calm. If you win, I will no longer interfere with your fighting methods. If you lose, tonight I will copy the 36 stratagems of the art of war for 100 all over. Rongzhan's face changed slightly. He weighed it in his mind silently, and found that no matter whether he won or lost, the result was not what he wanted. He didn't want to copy the art of war 100 times, nor did he want the emperor to stop asking about his affairs. So he could only admit his mistake. Brother, please calm down, I am no match for you. So you're admitting defeat? Rongzhan corrected, I am admitting my mistake. In my opinion, His Highness's admission of mistake is not sincere. Xianyuan said with a smile, let's play a game of chess with His Highness the Crown Prince and let our strength speak for itself. Rongzhan glared at him, can you shut up? Exactly, Xianyuan agreed. Rongzhan just didn't want to copy the book, so he admitted his mistake against his will. Your Highness, please don't let him go. Rongzhan had a sullen face and was so angry that he had nothing to say. When the prince saw this, he couldn't help but raise the corners of his lips. Okay, they are joking with you. Rongzhan's face softened a little, and he looked at him with his chin in his hands. Brother Huang, why did you go to the military camp? There is chaos in Huainan. Xianyuan said calmly, I'm going to confirm some things with Uncle Yao. Rongzhan said, do you need me to do anything? What can you do? Xianyuan raised his eyebrows, stood up and walked out of the pavilion. Take your Boy Scouts to Huainan and fight with them. Rongzhan was looked down upon repeatedly, and he was really a little dissatisfied. They are the youth army, not the Boy Scouts. Well, it was my slip of the tongue, Xianyuan said, his voice calm. So, you want to take the youth army to fight? Rongzhan had a toothache. He stood up and followed Xianyuan, still with a bit of childish voice sounding vigorous. Although I can't lead the army to suppress the rebellion alone, it should be possible to go out and gain experience. Anyway, sooner or later, I will have to charge for my brother and defend the territory, so that my brother can rule the world peacefully. Whoever dares to make trouble in the territory of Dongling, I will make him regret coming to this world. Second Prince, don't speak too early, Xianyuan said slowly. Defending the country and the territory also requires sufficient ability and courage. Without the ability to lead troops, it is far from being able to drive the enemy away with the identity of the second prince. Rongzhan was angry. Royal brother, I want to be alone with you for a while. Can I let all the irrelevant people get out? Don't be rude. Xianyuan tilted his head to look at him. Azan is also your brother. Who taught you to be so disrespectful to your brother? Rongzhan felt wronged, but he always laughs at me. Your Highness, you are wronging me. Xianyuan smiled gently and dangerously. I have the same idea as His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. You are young now, a little too impulsive and conceited. You have to change your temper, otherwise you are not suitable for leading troops. Azan is right. You have to change your temper. Xianyuan paused slightly, his eyes fell on his brother's face. You are young, you may not listen for the time being, and you will feel annoyed if I talk too much. Let's go to my study tonight and have a good talk. Rongzhan's scalp numbed. How does my brother want to talk to me? He won't use a ruler, right? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode. Thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 879. How we talk about it is my business, you can only obey. Xian Yuanhao looked at him calmly. Maybe I can let my father talk to you. Rongzhan's expression was slightly stern, and he quickly said obediently, I'd better talk to the emperor, and I don't dare to trouble my father. Xian Yuanzhan laughed. Tisk. Xian Yuanhui smiled with evil intentions. His Royal Highness, you have to teach him a lesson tonight. This kid has been a little distracted lately. Rongzhan wanted to quarrel with him, but he was afraid that the emperor's brother would say that he was neither old nor young, so he could only endure it. Zhaner is still young. You are either older than him or his elders. Don't think about bullying him all day long, the prince said in a calm tone. Whoever bullies him to tears should comfort him himself. As soon as these words came out, the three people fell silent. It is a fact that Xian Yuanzhan is older than Rongzhan, there is nothing to say. Although Xian Yuanhui is an elder, he is only half a year older than Rongzhan. Rongzhan never regards him as an elder. Now that he mentions the fact that he is an elder, it is really speechless. As for Rongzhan couldn't help but silently curse. What the emperor said, he is not a crybaby girl, who will cry after being bullied twice. Have you two had dinner? Rongzhan shook his head, not yet. Xian Yuanhui said, after we finished training in the military camp, His Highness heard that the prince had been to the military camp in the afternoon, so he returned to the palace in a hurry. So I haven't had time to have dinner yet. Xian Yuanhao looked at Rongzhan coldly. Be more careful in the future and don't act like a gust of wind all day long. Rongzhan didn't dare to speak, he just nodded obediently. Xian Yuanhao ordered people to prepare dinner for Rongzhan and Xian Yuanhui, and he and Xian Yuanzhan went into the study to continue discussing the affairs of Huainan. At this time, the general's mansion was already bustling with excitement. What are you doing? Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly, looking at the crowd of people in the courtyard. On weekdays, you teach your children to speak freely, curse and bully others, and then just apologize afterwards. General, forgive me. When I go back, I have already taught the traitor a lesson. It's your family's business to teach the rebellious son, so you don't need to tell me, Xian Yuanyao said with a stern tone. My lords, you seem to have some complaints about the affairs of this general and Mr. Xie in private. Why, our affairs have stained your eyes, or are they dirty? Do you need a good cleaning for your ears? The faces of everyone in the court suddenly changed, and they all begged for mercy in panic. I really didn't mean this, General, please calm down. I don't know who this traitor was bewitched by, so he uttered such arrogant words. I will definitely teach him a lesson after I go down, and I will never let him say these things again. Damn words. General, please calm down. It's my fault that I didn't teach my son well. I will definitely discipline my rebellious son well in the future. I will never do what I did today again. Please, General, give me another chance. You traitor, the middle-aged man kicked the boy next to him and scolded coldly and angrily, you still haven't apologized to the general. Thump. The boy who took the lead in bullying Xie Yao in the academy turned pale and kowtowed repeatedly. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me, General. I will definitely change in the future, I will definitely change. Other teenagers followed suit and begged for mercy. For a while, I could only hear a buzzing in my ears, which was extremely annoying. Xian Yuanyao's eyes fell on the head of the leading young man, and he did not miss the scars on his body when he knelt down. Even his clothes were torn, which showed that he was beaten badly after returning. Have you relieved yourself? Xian Yuanyao turned to look at Xie Yao. Do you want to forgive them? Xie Yao said, in addition to bullying me, they also insulted Daddy Yao and Daddy Jin. If Daddy Yao thinks he can forgive them, I have no problem. Xian Yuan Yao glanced at him and secretly thought that this kid and Xie Jin are really of the same character. The children born in the Xie family are hard to mess with at heart. Fortunately, they are restrained by themselves, otherwise they would definitely be little bullies like Xie Jin when they grow up. Yao is young and cannot take the initiative to cause trouble in the academy, but if others want to bully him, they have to think carefully. Xie Jin walked out of the room, dressed casually and charmingly in a light robe. According to my temper, I would have scolded him at that time. When the time comes, their mouths should be swollen. Xie Yao lowered his head and said, I'm afraid that Daddy Yao will punish me. You are so cowardly. Xie Jin glanced at him, aren't you afraid that I will punish you? Xie Yao didn't say anything, secretly thinking, who is the head of our family, do we still need to question it? As long as Daddy Yao says something, don't you have to rest obediently? But he had the courage to think this, but he didn't have the courage to say it. Xian Yuan Yao's words worked when he was at home, but there were also times when he was not at home. If he offended this Jin daddy, his life would not be easy. Several officials present would have been frightened, but when they saw Xie Jin coming out, their faces turned pale and they apologized profusely, except for Xie Jin calling him daddy. Xie Yao has never complained before when he came back, so I don't know if he was often bullied and abused in the academy. Today can be regarded as the first time. As for the general, that is your freedom, as long as you don't let me hear it, don't let your children hear it, otherwise it will not be very good for you if it gets out. After all, I and the general were personally ordered by Her Majesty the Queen. If there is another marriage, I will not take revenge on anyone privately. We will directly go to Her Majesty the Queen to seek justice. When the officials present heard this, they all breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that Xie Jin had let them go. I will strictly discipline him after he is dismissed from office, and I will never dare the same thing happen again. Thank you very much for your grace, Your Excellency. I dare not offend the Queen's order. Someone must have instigated this. I will investigate it when I go back to find out who is the one with bad intentions. Yes. I will investigate it when I go back today. Xie Jin waved his hand, you should teach your own children. If you do it again, I will not be polite. The officials said goodbye with gratitude, and kicked their rebellious sons as they walked away. I told you to learn well, but you didn't. You make trouble every day. Xie Jin and Xian Yuan Yao stood in the corridor and watched silently. They were not interested in knowing whether they were pretending to act here or really wanted to teach their son a lesson. After the group of people left, the two turned to look at Xie Yao. What? Xie Yao took a step back and looked at the two of them warily. I didn't fight or cause any trouble today. I didn't even move a finger. Father Yao can't punish me. Who wants to punish you? Xian Yuan Yao walked into the house. I was thinking about whether to hire a teacher to teach you at home, so that you don't have to go to the academy to deal with those playboys. Xie Jin raised his eyebrows and looked at Xie Yao calmly, what do you think? Unless Father Yao can eliminate all the playboys, people with bad behavior, corrupt officials and local bullies around me in advance when I grow up, otherwise I have no reason not to go to the academy. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 880. Although Xie Yao is young, he has a very clear mind. Of course, Xie Jin's education is more successful. Although these people who have been around me since childhood have bad personalities and bad character, because they are still young and have no power in their hands, the most they can do is rely on their father's status to show off their power. When they meet a child like Xie Yao who is younger than themselves, relying on the strength of people to bully one or two will not cause too serious consequences. But when you become an adult, you have to face all kinds of people. Overt competition for interests, secret intrigues, and even unprovoked hatred and ridicule. How can you avoid it if you want to? So the important thing is not to create a clean environment, but to let him learn to deal with different things and solve them in different ways from an early age. You're smart, Siejin said calmly. After you finish your homework for today, you can go and rest. Xie Yao agreed and turned around to go back to his house. Xian Yuanyao glanced at his back, and after he left, he said to Siejin coldly, "You are all smart people, but I am stupid." Siejin laughed, stepped forward and hugged his waist from behind. "What did Yao Yao say? You are the smartest person in the world, otherwise how could you subdue me, the second smartest fox?" "I don't dare to be the smartest person." Xian Yuanyao tilted his head to look at him, "But you think you are the second smartest person, but you are not humble at all." Siejin smiled and said, "Yao Yao thinks I need to be more modest." Xian Yuanyao thought for a while, "If you were humble, you wouldn't be Siejin. Yao Yao still understands me." Xian Yuanyao pushed his hand away, walked aside, and sat down. "Today the prince went to the military camp and told me about Huainan." "Huainan?" Siejin walked over, held the pot and poured him a cup of tea. "What's wrong with Huainan?" "After my father left Huainan, many local officials and gentry colluded and used illegal means to occupy people's land." Xian Yuanyao frowned, with a somewhat unsightly expression. "When my father was still here, strict laws and prohibitions were enacted to control Huainan. In this area, most of the annual tax revenue is spent on raising troops. Local officials and squires have no chance to take bribes and bend the law. After my father left, those officials suddenly became beasts on the run. In the past few years, they could restrain themselves and did not dare to cause chaos. Recently, in the past 2 years, I have become really unscrupulous." Siejin was silent for a moment. "Your Majesty, has the Huainan case been handed over to the prince?" "It's not clear yet." Xian Yuanyao slowly shook his head, "but the prince can now take charge of his own affairs, but he has little experience. If he really wants to personally supervise the Huainan case, it will take a long time and he can calm down and formulate a strict and feasible plan." "Okay. The prince is different from them. When they first went to Shangning to handle the case, they had help with many things, and even some clues were sent to them by the subordinates of Juxiao Pavilion. The Lord gave them strong help, making the case progress more smoothly, and ensuring that they would not will be put in danger. It can even be said that the reason why Siejin was able to rise to prominence and Xian Yuanyao was able to take charge of the country's military power so quickly was, in addition to their own abilities, the Lord's favor is the most important reason that cannot be ignored. Without favor, anyone would it can't rise that fast. With Rong Yu around, even if some people were jealous of Siejin and Xian Yuanyao, no one could do anything to them. But the prince is the crown prince and the future lord of Dongling. If the king of a country wants to shoulder the heavy responsibility of the world alone, he needs capable ministers and generals, but the biggest backing can only be himself. If he wants to be as powerful as his father, he must be stronger than everyone else." However, this sentence is easy to say, but the time, energy, and hard work required cannot be summarized in 1 or 2 sentences. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince looks exactly like the Lord. Even his expression and demeanor are so similar. He is simply a replica of the Lord. Xian Yuanyao took a sip of tea, and there was a little more subtlety in his voice. "Originally, as elders, we relied on these with many years of experience. I can occasionally teach you a few words, but every time I see that face and that expression, I can't say anything." Siejin hummed, "It's understandable." Xian Yuanyao glanced at him. "You are laughing at me." "Absolutely not," Siejin denied, his expression extremely calm and innocent. "Do you think I look a little bit mocking? Besides, how can I dare to mock Yao Yao?" Xian Yuanyao sneered. "It's late at night, let's talk about anything tomorrow." Siejin stood up. "It's time for us to go to bed." The weather was hot in June, and few people went out for activities. They stayed at home as much as possible to escape the heat if they didn't have anything important to do. Even the ferret that the prince had kept by his side for many years looked listless. The training time of the young soldiers in the military camp has been shortened. They train for an hour in the morning and evening every day. It is too hot during the day, so the young people can move freely in the military camp without excessive physical training. The companions accompanied the prince to study in the upper study in the morning, had lunch at noon, and assisted the prince in handling government affairs in the Kinzen Hall. During this period, Rong Zhan was called over and played 3 games with Xian Yuan Zhan every day to temper his impulsive temperament. Best of 3. Xian Yuan Zhan's chess skills are superb enough. Of course, this is not the most important thing, but the way he plays chess with Rong Zhan can drive people crazy. Every move is carefully considered, and the speed of the moves is extremely slow. The last hour was nothing. In other words, regardless of who wins or loses, the time it takes to play these 3 games alone is enough to make Rong Zhan feel on pins and needles. But he couldn't show impatience yet. Every time he couldn't sit still, his royal brother's eyes would glance over there, making him feel even more stressed. When playing chess, you should be calm and focused on the game without any distractions. Xian Yuan Zhan's voice was calm and gentle, and there was nothing wrong with the young man like a clear spring. Overcome negative emotions such as anxiety, annoyance, and displeasure. Rong Zhan frowned, but The Second Highness can't even sit still for half a day, so how can he calm down during a battle? Xian Yuan Zhan smiled lightly. On the battlefield, 2 armies confront each other. In order to paralyze the opponent or formulate a perfect attack plan, it often takes several days or even it takes dozens of days of calm observation and thinking, and it tests your endurance. Impulsiveness can easily lead to unpredictable consequences. Rong Zhan was dissatisfied. He felt that any trick in military tactics was redundant in the face of absolute strength. As long as the soldiers and horses were strong enough, so strong that they could not parry, and so strong that they were invincible, no matter how unpredictable the opponent's tricks were, and there is no room for display at all. However, he had just been trained by the imperial brother a few days ago, so he naturally did not dare to say such words again, although this was indeed what he thought in his heart.